Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our um, final flower training of 2025. We are really excited to share this tool with you guys, but also to give you a chance to also work with the tool. Um, so, to start us off, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Kelsey Bowens, and I'm the engagement manager with the Multisolving Institute. And I'm joined by my two colleagues, Beth and Stephanie. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with Beth.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Beth Sawin. I'm the founder and director of Multisolving Institute. We're just really excited to have you here today for an informal roll up your sleeves, give a try with this tool called Flower that we'll tell you more about in a minute. Stephanie, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stephanie McCauley. I'm COO at Multisolving Institute, and we're happy to have all of you here.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. And with that, we'd be really excited if everyone could also drop their name in the chat as well as where you are joining from, so that way we can all get acclimated with each other, um, and go ahead and dive into our presentation for today. So with that, I'm gonna share some slides that we prepared for you guys, and I will pass it over to Beth.
Yeah, well, once again, welcome. The next slide will kind of just get us oriented to what we're going to try to do for the next 90 minutes. So you're already introducing yourselves in the chat. Um, our goal today is to give you at least a flavor of this tool called Flower so that you feel ready to experiment with it in your own work. Flower is deceptively simple, we find. It has a first layer that is pretty quick to pick up for most people, but it can be used in a whole variety of different ways, and those could be a practice that you develop for quite a long time. I think most of you are here probably because you know something of this idea of multi-solving, which we define as helping people work together in ways that one investment of time or money can produce multiple benefits. And Flower is, as far as we know, the only tool designed to meet the really the requests of people doing this type of work. When we founded the Institute in 2021, one thing we did was interview a lot of multi-solvers. And what we heard was they're trying to use the tools that are designed for working in silos, right? For working in one sector at a time. Those are great tools and they can be applied to multi-solving. But what about this challenge of helping people see a whole system, building collective intelligence so that a group can understand the full breadth of all the people who are there? What about visualizing complexity? Those are some of the things that Flower is good for. Kelsey, could you go to Flower and just hover over the title? We'll orient people that way. So flower is an acronym. If you, yeah, if you go to the flower with your cursor, there it is. That's what I wanted. So flower stands for the Framework for Long-Term Whole System Equity-Based Reflection. As you've already gathered, it looks like a flower, but each of these parts of the name is really important. Um, the long-term part is about having a long view balanced with a short-term view. Whole system, seeing the whole thing. Equity-based. We're going to spend some time today looking at the equity analysis features of flower. And then reflection, the R, is actually in service of two other R's. So reflection, I think is obvious, is like understanding and inquiry, but it's reflection in service of results, right? We're not just doing flower as an academic exercise. The flower users that we've come to know are usually working with groups in communities, in organizations, trying to change something. So reflection for results, also reflection for another R word, relationships. The point of flower is to help bring people together across different parts of a system to be able to align and work better together. So reflection and relationships enabling results. There's a lot packed in to the R there. Kelsey, you want to go back to the slides for a second? Um, Flower, I think, actually has kind of three things you need to do at once to use it at its full potential. So one thing is actually the easiest probably is just moving the controls using the features of the software. So you're going to get to practice that today. The second thing is thinking about whole systems, getting more clear. What's the system you're working on? What are the parts of it? How might they change under different scenarios? So that's a systems thinking type of skill. We're going to work with that today. You're each going to get to think about a system that you choose to experiment with, something in your life or your work. The third part we're not going to touch today, but the third part is as important as the other two is facilitating. Flower doesn't have to be, but often is used for groups. So used for conversation, used for building shared understanding, used for building vision. Next year, we're looking forward to hosting webinars to talk about that part. But I know those of you who I know on this call, I know that many of you are excellent facilitators. Probably others of you are. These are also skills we can learn and help each other with. But it's a lot to try to pick all that up at once. So today we're going to focus on thinking in systems and then using Flower to visualize what you've been thinking about. Um, we're going to do this. You're going to want to have a browser open. We're going to have you downloading a worksheet and migrating to the Flower tool. And we'll walk you through all the steps of that. Because it's a 90-minute workshop, we're going to give you a little break in there to keep our energy up. And we're going to save time at the end for your thoughts and questions and discussion. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Kelsey. Oh, I guess maybe the last thing to, oh, Kelsey's got it. Go ahead, Kelsey.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Beth. Um, so just to make sure that we can really optimize the time that we have together and to get oriented, we're asking that you keep your microphones muted unless you've got a question as you're working through Flower. Um, in that case, if you've got a technical question, you could use the chat for technical issues. Beth, Stephanie, and I will be looking at the chat regularly. And if there's a question that we see that's coming up multiple times, we'll probably address that one out loud. In case you've got a thought or an idea that you'd like to share during the times where we are more interactive and having conversation. We just ask that you be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. Multi-solving is best done when everybody has an opportunity to share perspectives, so that way we've got as many perspectives in the room as possible. We also just wanted you guys to be mindful that this webinar is being recorded and will later be available. But we just wanted to let you guys know that. And feel free to send me a message privately if you've had any concerns about the recording, but it will mostly be shared on our website as well as our YouTube channel. So, with that, I think it's time to dive into the fun part where you guys get to download the worksheet that you're going to be using for today. So, I'm going to actually switch the screen over to the website. And this is how you'll be able to access the Flower worksheet. And let me see if I can get the link. Beth,
I
would you
got
mind
it.
dropping the link?
Yep,
Okay,
it's
thank you.
coming right up. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So with that, once you get to our Flower website, you should see this page here. And this is where you can scroll down. At first, this is how you'll be able to access Flower, but we're not quite there yet. If you scroll down, and you'll see that there is a Flower worksheet. So if you click that button that says Flower worksheet, you should be able to access a PDF file that you'll actually be able to fill out during our time together today. Um, so with that, we've also provided an example flower worksheet. I'm going to click that one just for the sake of showing it. Um, in this worksheet, this is what you guys will be filling out today, but some of you may have come to some of our other flower events in the past. And we have the multi-solving city of Greenfield. So we use that example to fill out this worksheet as well to give you an idea, but we'll go through this together step by step. Um, has everybody been able to access the flower worksheet?
If you're having trouble, put it in the chat and we'll try
Yeah.
to help you. Another technical thing is that the Flower tool itself is optimized for a Chrome browser. So if you happen to have Chrome, um, and you could choose that, go for it. If not, don't worry, but it'll be might be a little bit more beautiful in Chrome.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Ale. She also dropped the link directly to the PDF file in the chat as well, if you guys want to use that. Um, Finally, one more thing to note on this website is here you will find the user guide. So if you've got any questions, obviously we're here to help live in action, but this is also another reference point that you can click to access the user guide that will give you some details on how the online tool works. So that's another resource for you to use as well. Okay. So it seems like we don't have any issues so far. So I think with that, I'm going to pass it back to Beth. And now we're going to begin to dive into defining a system and also um, helping people to sort of understand um, what this type of work that we're doing with Flower can help you to think about. So, Beth.
Thanks, Kelsey. Well, at Multisolving Institute, one of our core disciplines is systems thinking and systems analysis. And in fact, multisolving works because we live in a world of interconnected parts that work together. A lot of times people try to avoid interconnection, but for multisolving, we actually try to work with it. Um, so a system, as we define it, is a connection of parts that create a behavior by virtue of how they're connected. Um, so I live in a small town, that's a system. Um, I grow vegetables in a garden, that's a system. I'm sitting here in a body, my body is a system. So is my pancreas, so is my family. Um, so the next step, we're going to ask you what system you want to focus on today. But before we get to that, just to kind of warm up this, what's a system? We have a quick Zoom poll that Kelsey will launch. Just throw out short ideas of systems, like I just said, gardens, bodies, etc. Okay, so we can see that people are answering these. Do you see the results, Kelsey?
Actually can't. I think I'll have to wait until we end the poll
Oh,
and then I'll
okay.
be able to see yep.
Great. Okay, we're going to keep this quick, so just another 10 or 15 seconds.
I think I'll end it here. So as you can see, based on this word cloud here, and I'll actually see if I can zoom that in some. Um, we've got transportation, systems, academic, um, like action, schools, cities, watersheds, climate. So yeah, these are some great examples of systems. Let me
Great.
get back.
So having done that, the next thing that we want you to do is think about today. So if you have your worksheets open, step one is define the system, and you have a box that you should be able to type in. just a couple words, just like we were doing with the Zoom poll. Think of the system you want to use today. Uh, Ideally, it's something you know a lot about, where you live, where you work. The next steps you're going to do are to imagine a way to improve that system and build a flower about that idea. So the more it's familiar to you, the easier it will be. My advice is keep it simple, so you can learn today. So you probably don't want like the global financial system to be your system for today. But the park next door could be a great one. Okay, so everybody should go to their worksheet and we'll give you a couple minutes to think and type in your definition. Um, the example we're gonna be kind of moving back and forth between your own work and this example. So the example in the city of Greenfield, we're going to focus on a system that's a 15-acre parcel that's surrounded by neighborhoods in the middle of an imaginary US city called Greenfield. So that's how we're defining the system that we'll show you as an example. Um, all right, we'll give you like a minute or two to think about your system. And remember to use the chat if you get stuck with on anything. I think something would help us if you get to where you're like, okay, I'm done with that. Give a little thumbs up, and that will help us. If we see a few people with thumbs up, we can be sure. If you have your camera on, you can help. All right. I see Alessandra. Oh, there you go. You can also, brilliant. I like this self-organizing system. Use your thumbs up emoji. So Kelsey, I think they're ready. Do you want to go to the next step, the needs assessment?
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so as you'll notice, taking us back to Flower, once you are past the home page, there is a needs assessment screen. So on this screen, we've got different benefits that might happen as a result of implementing a project or different topics or areas where you might need to have an improvement within your system. And so one way that we'll explain later how this screen connects with like once we create our flowers. But the main thing is we want to make sure that people understand that the projects and the ideas that you have within these systems could potentially help to better the system, or in our case, multi-solve. So we know that there are different types of learners. Some people do better with reading, some people do better with visualizations. So, one thing that we are curious about is how do you feel like a visualization can help people understand how systems impact your community's needs? So, I'm actually going to launch another poll question. Um, where you guys can answer. Okay, that should be there now. So just thinking through ways of how we can basically take something that might start as an idea, but ultimately end up as an actual result within your community. So we'd love to just hear different ways of how, um, to the title of our presentation today, how can flower potentially unlock the power of possibilities within the system you've identified? So we've got a couple of answers coming in, and we'll give you guys maybe like one more minute, couple of seconds or so, to fill this out, and then we will share some of the ideas of how these visualizations can help.
Yeah, I would say think about things like taking action, building understanding. Think about your work and where has visualization helped people or helped you help people.
It looks like we've got one more just rolled in. Okay, I'll give it maybe 10 more seconds, and then we'll end this poll. Okay. So, were you guys able to see I shared the results. Can you guys see the results of what some of those ideas are?
I'm not
Yeah,
seeing it
I see
yet. Oh,
results.
Okay, we'll go this way. And thank you guys for being patient with us. We are experimenting, but it looks like visualizations, some of the answers we got are it can show the interconnected or the different parts, how interconnected the different parts are, and that one change can impact another part. Seeing relationships, alignment across language differences is an excellent one. Help us better understand how people are affected in ways we may know or don't know. Right. So it looks like you guys are getting the point that visualizations can help with seeing some of the interconnections and also helping with relationships. But more importantly, it can also remove some of the barriers from understanding ideas, one, across languages and across geographic boundaries, um, and helping people to better understand visual metaphors. Yeah, I really like that. Oh, I really like this one too. Sorry. Making invisible dynamics more visible and support seeing the points of connections between people, projects, and ideas. Yeah, that's an excellent way. Thank you all for sharing that. So now, if you will go back to your worksheet, um, take into consideration the system that you identified in step one, and now we want you to think of the degree of like a need that is in that system. So, for those different degrees of need, like you'll say if there's, for example, going to our Greenfield community, there is a high need for people to have more jobs and livelihood. Maybe that's not something that's currently within that system. Resilience is sort of minimal, as well as built environment. Climate protection is high because the mayor has pledged to reduce emissions by the end of her term. So that speaks to something that's very important that needs to be um, fixed or at least addressed within this system. So we're going to ask that you fill out step two of your worksheet using the terms high, minimal, or moderate. And the reason that we ask you to use those three terms is because it correlates directly with the minimal, moderate, and then the significant here on how much improvement is needed within that area on your worksheet.
Kelsey, I might just add one thing about this. So remember at the beginning, I said there's thinking about your system, there's using the software, and then there's facilitation. So that's a great example of that is imagine you convened a group of people for a community breakfast, and you might not all agree what's the most needed improvement. Some people might say it's jobs, and others might be really focused on health. So you could take a whole morning on this question and build shared understanding just by interacting with either the chart you're about to fill out or the software. So just to sort of like imagine bigger possibilities while we do this kind of contained version today.
Thank you, Beth. So we'll give you guys about 5 minutes to complete this section of your worksheet. Um, and again, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. Or if you use the raise your hand feature to come off of mute to ask us, that works as well.
I'll say one more thing I always say about flower. There's no perfect flower diagram. There's no one right way. And you can always modify and change it later. So the spirit is light experimentation. So don't get too hung up on something. If you're not sure, just write not sure and keep it moving. Okay, so I'm going to answer out loud a couple questions. If our system is small, like a workplace, not sure how to think about biodiversity. Um, I would think probably you would stick with minimal in that case, right? Like people at your workplace, at least in the context of work, biodiversity might not be a consideration, and that's completely fine. Um, Jane's asking, are you asking how significant these needs are in your community or how significant they are to the project? Yeah, thank you for asking. It's how significant is it for the community, for the people, for the organization? The reason this is here, if any of you have ever been engaged as like in something where a consultant flies in with a solution without asking people what they need first, the reason we start with the needs assessment is to reverse that and become clear like what's keeping people awake at night. And for the purposes today, you can answer just for yourself, or you can think of conversations you've had and be like, well, the EJ group in our neighborhood is definitely going to be talking about health. So define it for yourself, however serves. And this is all just practice for today.
You've got about 3 minutes left to fill out your chart just for a quick time update.
So I see a good question. Different stakeholders have different needs, how to manage that. And that sounds like someone picturing, using this in a group setting. Um, the premise of multi-solving is we're looking for the way to meet many needs at once. So you want to pull forward as many needs as you possibly can, because that's going to be the charge really is what could we do together that might advance all of these needs at the same time. So you don't have to have the needs be in competition. Um, but you do want some sense of priority because that will guide you in the next steps.
We've got about 1 minute left. Thank you for that, Beth. So you could finish up your thoughts on this chart. Or actually, if you guys need more time, can you do like the thumbs up emoji? Because we could maybe spare a couple of minutes. Looks like no. Okay.
I
Oh,
can
Beth,
tell
looks
there's,
like we've got one more.
yeah, I can tell there's facilitators in the room. This is awesome. Would you use this with democratic facilitation techniques and have everyone fill it out like a World Cafe or Future Search? Yeah, I think for sure. One thing we've imagined is actually implementing in the software a way to poll everybody and get kind of a ranking, or you could use polling software, the Zoom software to do that. Um, one thing as you use Flower more, you'll start to see how deliberately flexible we've made it. So you could probably imagine things we've never thought of as a way to fill out this needs assessment. And we'd love to hear that, hear what you come up with also.
Yeah, thank you for that, Beth. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to invite everyone to actually um, dive into the Flower software. So for this, if you go back to the multisolving.org/flower website, which I believe will probably get dropped in the chat soon, at the top of that page, you will see the option to open Flower. So I invite everyone to open Flower, and it should take you to our home page. I'm going to go here since I have it here. So you should see this page. And what we'll do is now ask you to click down on the Assess Needs tab on the left side of the screen, and that will take you to this chart where you can now convert the work that you put into the worksheet onto the Flower software. So in this case, I'm going to fill this out based on the example, the Greenfield sample example that we've got here. Um, So I'm just going to fill out for the sake of time, like two or three um, of the different areas, the categories. So as we can see, the jobs and livelihood, there's a high degree of need there. So for this step, I'm going to go to jobs and livelihood and move the slider all the way over to significant. For the biodiversity, it looks like preserving the variety of life that can be found on Earth, that there is a Greenfield Conservation Commission. So I think that speaks to a point that came up in the chat of having diverse perspectives in the room. Um, Based on the Greenfield Conservation Commission, they've have a pretty moderate level of priority for this. So we're going to make sure that that is reflected in our needs assessment and move the biodiversity slider over to moderate. And I'll do one more. Um, it looks like there's a large percentage of family income that tends to go towards food. So that means the degree of need in that area is minimal. So for the food and water slider, I'm going to go back here and I'm actually going to move this slider back to minimal.
I want to just flag that doesn't make total sense. I think we've got a little error in our example. So Kelsey said it for minimal. I don't think the reason really quite made sense there. I just don't want anyone to be confused. Um, as the maker of that worksheet, I recognize that. So do you all see the mechanics? You should grab the little circles and you can slide it in any direction. While you're practicing that, I'll also just say you can maybe imagine the potential for learning and listening in this exercise. So if someone from the Conservation Commission says the need is moderate, the question is, well, why? Because they're going to know a lot more about pollinators than the Children's Asthma Coalition representative sitting across the table, right? Um, and so nobody has to deliver a report in this kind of process for people to be able to learn from one another. So already just in doing the needs assessment, you can start to try to build shared understanding.
Shane, it looks like, again, the flower tool is optimized in Chrome. So it's okay if the line is not colored in case you're not in the Chrome browser. Um, but as long as the dots are moving along the slider, that should be fine. All right. Um, with that, now that we have our needs assessment, we are going to move on to step 3. And here you're going to brainstorm a project that is built based off of step 1 and 2. So just as a reminder, in step 1, we defined the system of the area where we would like to make some sort of improvement. In step 2, we identified some areas that might need improvement within the system. And so now step 3 is where you get to brainstorm to think about what type of project or what type of change in your community or the system you defined would need to happen in order to meet those needs. So we will give you guys about 5 minutes to brainstorm through different projects on this. And then we will go back to our City of Greenfield example to show you some of the project ideas that we have to address this 15 acres that's surrounded by industrial land. So, and if you have any questions, feel free to continue to use the chat. Thanks.
And this is a time to be kind of wide open in your thinking. We'll narrow in the next step. Um, and this is where if you had a group, there might be a lot of energy and a lot of different ideas. Um, and with more time, you could make a flower for each idea. So today we're just going to pick one. But part of flower is to help people sort through all the possibilities that might be in their minds.
I'll also add to Beth's note, if you do um, benefit from having other thoughts or other people to chime in on an idea that you might have, you can use the raise hand feature if you'd like to share some of your brainstorm projects once we get past our 5 minute um, idea. So that way you can sort of narrow down on which project it is that you want to use. So no pressure, but only if it's beneficial.
I'm going to take one question from the chat. I hope it's not distracting too much while you fill in your brainstorms. So John's asking about the needs categories, those colorful areas that go down the left on the needs assessment, and whether we ever use different ones. So this is a common question because um, not every situation, these 8 needs are going to be the most important ones. They're the most common we've encountered in our work. So we've heard from a lot of users that it would be nice to be able to change those. And in fact, in our research and development version, so not the online public version you're using, there is the ability to change those categories to make up new ones, or like if you don't like resilience, but you like preparedness. All of you who are facilitators know how important it is to match the language of who you're working with. So we hope to be able to share that feature in the next release.
You guys have about 2 minutes left to start to wrap up your brainstorming session. And thank you for the great questions.
Oh, so another great question from Rhiannon. Would you ever have more than 3 levels? Uh, yeah, so could you be between moderate and significant? So as you were dragging the blue circles and moving them, you noticed you could stop anywhere along the way. Um, so if you thought it's halfway between moderate and significant, yeah, Kelsey, you could just move one to show. Um, so that might be a little bit of a limitation of our chart our worksheet. We can maybe make it a little easier to add gradation there. But we would expect in a conversation, you would probably be moving these back and forth a little bit till they felt right.
Question. Thank you for that. Um, okay, for the sake of time, we are going to pause our brainstorming just for a moment. And I'm going to share an example. So, in the city of Greenfield, a couple of the brainstorming projects that the different stakeholders came up with was one, a farmer's market every Saturday to utilize the vacant land, community gardens, and a bike path to connect the north and the south neighborhoods, or a sports field and a park.
I like that our slides that we edited like 5 times say a bike bath, which sounds like a really useful thing. If your bike's all muddy, you take it and give it a bath.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Beth.
Yeah, okay. Um, So let's see, we're a tiny bit ahead of schedule. Do you want to see if there's anyone come off mute with a question and then we can go on to the next step?
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. And for those questions, feel free to, if it's like you've got a list of projects and you want to have some input on that, we're open to doing some joint thinking with you as well on that right now.
Um, yeah, all right. So there's also a couple awesome questions. Is there a brainstorming section in the portal? Yeah, we have that now on our list of future development. So there's what's in the pipeline, and then there's the wish list. And the idea that there could be like a scratch pad to not have to move back and forth from worksheet to flower. But so far, what you've got is the best we've got. Um, uh, to you can save the slider settings. I'm going to say let's not go into that today, but it's explained in the user guide. So you can save settings if you want to recreate something that you've built or share it with somebody else.
Looks like we've
And
got a question from Jane.
Thank you. I think you've probably been responding to it and what you just said, because what I just learned about you 2 days ago, and it's perfect timing because we're in the process of planning some community conversations at our library starting after the first of the year, and our purpose behind it is to find out what people in the community care about, and then I love what I'm seeing here about how to begin to put it together. So I'm not we're not going to be coming into this with those priorities already identified. We want the people in our town to identify them and then work together to see how it creates all these petals in this flower. So, I mean, it
that's
sounds like it's
beautiful.
possible
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's the true spirit of community organizing. And we love it if flower is helpful with that. Thanks, Jane. Go ahead, Beth.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I was wondering about like the judging of high, medium, low or minimal, and that, is it like the climate resilience folks would help decide medium, and does that compare to the medium from the different, like they're all such different dimensions, and how do you
Yeah.
decide who grades what? Because I could be like, I think it's medium, I think it's low, but is it really? And how do you compare across issues is, I guess, my question.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So this is one of the either most beautiful or most challenging things about flower. And you're going to see it even more in the next step. It's not quantitative and there's no outside authority who's going to tell
Mhm.
you if you've done it right. Um, and as Beth is pointing out, the units of everything are different, right? Like health might be measured in um, years of healthy life, and climate might be measured in CO2 emissions. You can't ever put those on the same scale. Um, we have a lot of faith in people, though, to, if they have enough time um, and really listen to each other, to come up with a set of settings that work for them. So on the needs assessment, it's how much improvement is needed here. Like what's keeping us awake at night? What's hurting us the most? And it won't be that everyone will agree either. Uh, that's why you can move the sliders. You'll see you can go back and forth. So you could say, well, what if Jane's vision is really what's needed? What if Beth's vision is? Um, so it's a little bit dissatisfying for those of us, especially like me, who like to like do the assignment right. It's not clear always how to do that, but we think it sets up rich conversation, and we've seen that. But good conversation, good question. All right, Kelsey, I think we should probably get back to it to keep with our
Okay.
schedule. Um, okay, so I'm going to take us through the next step. Um, what we're going to do now, we're just going to leave your needs assessment. So don't move those sliders for a bit. Um, and we're going to fill in another part of the worksheet. If you want to show the slide that shows that part, Kelsey.
Yep.
Um, so you'll find in your worksheet step 4. So the first thing is to choose a project. So you probably have a few things from your brainstorm. Now you just pick one that you want to play with for the next few minutes. Some good advice here because of our timetable, pick one that seems pretty simple, I would say, if you have a range of them. So where it says project name, just type, you know, bike path, little free library, whatever your idea was for an intervention. And then you're going to want to say, if that project as you envision it was completely successful, how would each of these things change? Jobs, resilience, built environment, etc. And you're going to write in the column that says change if project succeeds, something that's somewhere from significantly worse to significantly better. Okay. So if I create a food forest, probably food and water is going to be somewhat or significantly better. Um, Somewhat worse and significantly worse is there to acknowledge that sometimes there's trade-offs, right? Sometimes if we spend money on one thing, we don't have money for another thing, or we build solar panels, but it actually reduces biodiversity for some reason. So we're going to give you, again, about 5 minutes, go through for each type of benefit and answer your best guess for now of do things get better, worse, or if they sort of stay the same, you can choose none. If that makes sense, you can start. Kelsey, can you try to answer Eduardo's question?
Yes.
And while you all keep working on your worksheet, I'm just going to um, answer this question from JD, which is a good one, asking if you had multiple perspectives in a room, is there some way to sort of average or aggregate everybody's input to come up with a slider setting? Um, so I think the answer is yes, via different ways to facilitate. Right now, there's not a function in Flower. Like you could imagine everybody gets a vote and the software could add it all up. We haven't done that because really a key point of Flower is to facilitate people listening to each other. And so if you're only, and I'm not sure JD would say only, but as soon as you are just like, okay, we're just gonna each have our thought and then we're gonna see where the middle of it is, we think you miss some opportunities for learning and shared understanding. We're gonna talk in a little while about equity, which is a key value at Multisolving Institute. But one thing about equity means that people who are privileged moving through systems may be really oblivious to some needs in a system. And if the deep pain and need from another part of their community is just a dot that gets averaged up, you've missed an opportunity for people to learn from each other. So it's a bit of a deliberate design choice. We think you could do it, and maybe there's situations where it would be reasonable or helpful. And we always say there's no one right way to use Flower. So also like go ahead and experiment and let us know how it goes. But that's a little bit of our thinking about it. I think we have about 1 minute left. So um, finish up for now, filling in this step 4. You can always go back to it. Okay. We generally ready to go on? Thumbs up if you can go on. Or thumbs emoji. Couple I see.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the next step is if kind of you can familiar by now. What you're going to do is translate from your worksheet to Flower. And so we're going to do that for the Greenfield example, and we'll just do it for a couple of the benefits. But we'll start with jobs. So for the Greenfield example, we chose the farmers market out of all of those brainstorms. If there was a farmers market, it seems like jobs and livelihoods might improve a little bit. And that's because farmers would have more market for what they had produced. So the way we're going to represent that in flower is first you're going to go to the Create Flowers tab or View by clicking on where it says Create Flowers. Then you're going to want to make sure that the dark blue color is where it says Benefits all the way on the left. Okay, once you've done that, you'll see there's a drop-down menu that has all 8 of the different types of benefits. So the one that's showing on Kelsey's screen is Jobs and Livelihoods, which is what we want to do. So we said Jobs and Livelihoods would get somewhat better. So Kelsey's going to show how you would move a slider. You're going to drag it from no change to somewhat better. So that creates the dark blue petal for Jobs. And Kelsey, just show if you move it up and down, like if it really improved, if you drag it all the way to the top, it gets super big. If somehow Jobs got worse in your scenario, what happens is the petals turn gray. And the more worse, the bigger the gray. So you can look at a flower, and if it's big and colorful, that means lots of improvement. If it's small or invisible, it means not much change. And if it's gray, it means this was a loss actually to the system. So we'll do one more and then you can try your own. We'll just do the next one, resilience, also somewhat better. So if you're supporting local farms, you would have a more resilient food system. So Kelsey's going to go back to flower. She's going to choose resilience from the drop-down menu. She's going to drag it to somewhat better. And now that sort of purpley color for resilience is going to show up. Okay, so take a couple minutes and try that on your own and let us know if you get stuck. Also, I'll just say, since we're kind of at the top of the hour, if during this 5 minutes of playing with the petals, you need to take a break or a stretch or get a drink, just feel free to do what you need to do and then come back to us. Okay, I'm tempted to move on. You might not have finished, but I think you have probably the gist of how to do it, so you can always go back. Kelsey, last thing, if you would go back to flower, I want to just mention one other feature. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I want you to look at that little blue circle that says 33. So that's what we call the needs score. And this is what connects the brainstorm idea that you're diagramming with the needs assessment. The more your idea produces benefits that address what you said were the most important needs, the higher that number will be. It will go from 0 to 100. So Kelsey, if you go to the assess needs, we can remind them. So we said jobs was a really important need. And so if Kelsey goes to the flower that she created and she makes the jobs benefit bigger, watch what happens to number 33. All right, you see how it gets bigger and bigger. If she made another benefit bigger that wasn't such a priority, the score would go up a little bit, but it's a weighted function. So the more you get the benefits that your community has identified, the higher that score will be. That's especially helpful if you're comparing more than one idea. So Kelsey, just show how we would make 2 flowers if we had more time.
Down
You
at the
can make,
bottom.
yeah. You can make anywhere from 1 to 4 flowers. Each one will have its own needs score, so they're all being compared to the same needs. And so Jane, when you get your community together at the library, they might have 4 ideas. They could use the needs score to sort which one might line up best with their needs. Eduardo is asking how the score is calculated, and the details are in the user guide, but it's really kind of a weighted, you can think of it as a weighted average, that the bigger a benefit that's a key need, the more influence it has on the score. All right, so Kelsey, I think you should take us to equity.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay. Um, and there's actually a comment here from Kara. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. But um, for the flower tool, she mentions that there's no effect for resilience in terms of benefits, but in terms of equity, I would choose a positive effect on resilience. So that is one limitation of the software right now is that if there is not a pedal that exists for benefits initially, that you won't be able to move the slider for that pedal once you click on the equity tab. Um, and I also think part two of that, or I guess what Kara thinks part two of that is that it made her wonder how to consider benefits if equity is separate. It seems like equity would also be a benefit. Um, or if you chose worse in terms of the jobs, but better for equity in terms of the jobs, it made the pedal a darker gray, not colorful. So to establish that, or I guess to sort of, and thank you for providing that thought, Kara. I think one, if the importance of equity, I think one of the ideas that we want to share is that the importance of equity actually should be integrated into your benefits. So even if there is not a direct benefit that you can name initially, but equity is part of your second thought, perhaps, then maybe it's going back to the conversation initially to say, okay, well, resilience is important in terms of equity. So let's move this pedal up initially so that way you can then see the impact of it. And then for the sake of visualization, and I'll go back to the actual flower slide. So if we were to click over to equity, I'm going to make sure I'm by the way, if you have multiple flowers, this highlighted blue around the name of the flower, you want to make sure that you click back here so that way you're making changes on your first flower. Um, let's say that jobs and livelihood, there are more jobs, but the jobs are only available to a certain demographic. Um, that equity would get worse, which means your pedal would become more transparent. But let's say that the jobs are available to the people that need them most, then your pedal would become more opaque. So even if your pedal is a dark gray, because it shows that it's a more opaque color, that speaks to maybe there was more focus on equity in that piece as opposed to like the overall benefits of it. So I think the goal of that level of nuance is to get people to understand the importance of equity, and hopefully that sort of answers that question. Um, so going back to this graphic here, and this was a graphic I'm sure that you all have probably seen some version of this before that was created by the Center for Story-Based Strategy and the Interaction Institute for Social Change. Um, Obviously, liberation would be the ultimate goal, but I think the idea here is that you are creating systems, i.e., these boxes that make it to where even if those barriers are in place, you're making sure that everybody is equally able to access or to benefit from that. And equity is a really important pillar here at Multisolving Institute. And if you actually have a copy of or plan to order a copy of the book that Beth recently published, you'll notice that equity is the one property of multi-solving with an entire chapter dedicated to it. So I just want to read a quick excerpt to define what equity is as viewed through a systems lens. So Beth writes, so what is equity when viewed through a systems lens? I would submit that equity, or the lack of it, is a property that emerges from a system's structure. The arrangement of stocks, flows, and feedback loops in a system produces whatever level of equity the system displays. The system structure influences whether people are paid equally for equal work. It shapes which groups have access to education, safe housing, and clean water, and which groups do not. So I think that speaks to the importance of equity and what we think about it in terms of how systems can change. So, with regard to going back to the worksheet, we are now going to brainstorm through different types of equity. So, most communities you'll find on your worksheet have multiple dimensions of equity. Which ones do you think are the most critical for the project that you are diagramming? Um, so in this example, for the city of Greenfield, we want you to sort of think about, well, I guess not city of Greenfield, but we want you to sort of think about the different dynamics of equity, whether that's age, whether that's access, whether that's gender, racial, all the different types of equity that exist, and making sure that you are considering those different system structures within the project that you have now created and Flower for. And then we'll show you the equity feature of the Flower tool. So you'll take a moment to sort of brainstorm through those types of equity and fill out your chart there. Um, and we'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. And then we'll build out a flower um, based on the Greenfield City example, but also give you a moment to build out your flower with the equity piece as well. So Beth, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think this part, I'll say just one thing because I think it can be a little confusing. Um, Once you start thinking about your brainstorm project, it's possible that it's going to improve some types of equity and not improve others. So equity isn't a blanket thing. You need to think about equity for for whom. Um, so let me see if I can think of an example. A project that created a bike path from a primarily Latino neighborhood that gave access to active transportation for Latino people. That would be probably an improvement to racial equity. Um, but if the bike lane wasn't necessarily thinking about people who weren't physically able to bicycle, it's not going to be an improvement when it comes to disability as a type of equity. So, in order to represent equity in your flower, you have to think about which type of equity. And sometimes more than one type will be important. So, you can make the same flower but show the equity for those different types of equity. And this is, not in service of making the flower, it's in service of giving your community a reason to talk about equity, to talk about the types of equity, and it's for improving your projects so that they share burdens more evenly and make sure that the benefits flow to people who've historically been disenfranchised. So that's why we're asking you to think of multiple types of equity. And then for today, you're just going to experiment with one type. So I hope that helps.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move along. So now we're going to go back to our flower diagram that we've built. So as a reminder, investment one is a reflection of what we filled out so far based on the city of Greenfield. Um, and the example here, or some like dimensions that we have of equity, in this case, might be economic equity. So we'll say that I'm actually going to slide this back to none. So we are at a space. So, okay, when you go into Flower, you're going to make sure that instead of clicking on the Benefits tab where that is dark blue, that you're actually now going to switch over to the Equity tab, and making sure that that is dark blue. Next, you want to make sure that you go back up to this drop-down menu with all of the different benefit categories. For the city of Greenfield example, we are going to stick with jobs and livelihood, and we'll say that equity gets somewhat better because as a result of building out our Saturday farmers market, the project will offer special rates and support to farmers who would like to come out to sell some of their products. So we'll move this here. And as you can notice, the petal gets a little bit more opaque. And I'll actually move this in between somewhat better and significantly better for the sake of the point that we made earlier. So you can see that jobs and livelihood now is a more flourishing petal because equity was also embedded into that. Now let's just do one more example of biodiversity. So let's say that there's actually not a change in equity for biodiversity because the biodiversity protection would benefit everyone that's involved in the farmers market. So there would be no change there. Um, and so we'll just see that that petal remains with the same sort of like translucent but standard color. So for your project now and the maybe the one idea or the one um, facet of equity that you thought of, we're going to ask you to go ahead and build out your flower for that. And we'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. And then we will start to close out our session and open up the floor for any questions and answers.
Oh, I see Jane's question is a good one. So sometimes you might find in the equity tab, the controls have disappeared. That's usually because you picked from the drop-down menu. Kelsey, maybe you can show this.
Yeah.
A tab where you said there's no benefit. So um, if Kelsey picks health, you see how the slider controls are gone. Um, that's because it doesn't really make sense to talk about the health benefit and how it's shared if there isn't a health benefit. Does that make you're shaking your head? Doesn't make sense.
No,
So,
when I switch to any different element in that drop-down menu, I don't get any of the options.
huh. Okay,
So
so
I'm
that's
just
something
letting you
else
know.
is
It's a
going
tech
on.
thing. Who knows?
Yeah, sounds like. Um, well, you can always try to reload, but that's not something we've run into before. Sorry about that, Jane. Thanks, Jonathan, for the user design tip. I agree. Um, I will say Flower is a shoestring project. It doesn't have the kind of budget behind it that gets your really fancy user interfaces, but we're keeping working on fundraising for that. So all these suggestions are great that we can hopefully add in future versions.
And I just opened up the chat, Beth, and see that we've got a question from JD that might be worth answering. Does the flower guide have examples of equity levers for transformation to support folks whose circumstances don't typically bump up against inequitable practices or systems?
Oh yeah, great question. Um, yeah, I think this is another example of flowers sort of waiting to be embedded in your teaching and facilitation. So flower can open the door to equity and it can give you a reason to bring people together to discuss equity. Um, and depending on what culture, society you come from, what dimensions of equity are up there, what the historic violence and polarization is, it's going to take a different approach. But I think you're naming a really important thing, which is if you haven't experienced the consequences of inequity or the negative consequences, right? If you've been privileged on most dimensions, um, I have a teacher who says that gives you kind of a learning disability, right? Like you don't actually have lived experience of oppression and marginalization. Um, so if you want to have effective conversations with people with different levels of privilege, to decide where to set sliders, you might not start out right with sliders, right? You might do some equity 101 uh, And you might only need to invite the privileged people. I know some facilitators I've worked with are like, yeah, people of color don't need another equity training really. But white middle class people like me, they might benefit from that. So that just speaks to what you choose to embed flower into. So I'd say like really important point, flower right now probably isn't gonna like on its own handle that for you.
My response, Beth.
What's that?
I said thank you for the
Oh,
response.
you bet.
Yep.
Would you add
Um,
anything to that, Kelsey?
yeah, I guess I would just add an example of that is previously in my work, I was part of a team that would build parks. And whenever we brought on new partners, part of the contractual agreement was that we started with a racial equity training, and they'd never understood why we made them do the racial equity training and what that had to do with parks until they finished it. And then they started to do the work in the neighborhoods, and they were like, now we understand that connection. So I think just to reiterate Beth's point earlier is that it might not be as amazing as flower is, it won't be um, one part. It's only a piece of the puzzle, and you still have to pull in other pieces to really get your people to understand the type of work and the type of systems change that's happening in regards to equity, in regards to the physical changes and everything that might be happening within the systems that you are um, building these flowers for. So I would just add that point.
Great.
Um, and with that, I think we have a little over 5 minutes left, and we want to make sure that we are offering time for any questions or just general comments and open feedback. But with that, we want to thank you guys, and I think a big part of the session for today is that um, making sure that we can understand ways to improve flower. So we really appreciate all of the comments in the chat that helped us to think about different design features. And we've got a short survey that you guys can take either now or later on in your own time. I promise it won't take more than 3 minutes to fill out. But just to share some different ways that you think flower could work within your work. And then we also want to make sure that we invite everyone to our next event, which is coming up on December 18th. And we'll be having a multi-solving moment. It's a pre-solstice gathering where basically we get people to come together, and these meetings are not recorded, but it allows people to have an open, brave space to reflect on 2025, but also to think about steps that we can take in the future to prepare for more multi-solving that's still ahead of us. So we invite you to do that. I believe Stephanie shared a link to order your copy of the multi-solving book. We've also got a promo code multi MULTI, and I believe that will give you a discount. So this is the promo code. I just dropped that in the chat. Um, and see what else. Oh, please subscribe to our newsletter. That's the best way to stay in contact with us about events that we have coming up. And then we're also um, happy to share more information about our Impact Lab, which is a way that we could potentially work with people to apply these tools and to gain a better understanding for your work as well. So with that, we want to open up the floor and just provide any questions or answer general feedback from you guys.
And congratulations, you guys hung through a lot of complicated instructions. Feels like mostly it worked. So we're
This is a
pretty happy
lot
about that.
this is a lot to take in because I'm new to this, but I've been doing, I have looked for years on how to break down the silos among different well-meaning organizations, both in my community and, in public and private and all of that. And I think you've just opened the door to that, and I really appreciate that.
Aw, that's wonderful. Thanks for saying that, Jane. Go ahead, Ale.
Yes, I just wanted to also echo Detlef's words. This was very enriching. Thank you for guiding us through a whole training on the flower, and yeah, definitely more to explore. I did have a question around saving all this beautiful work that we are creating and whatnots. Would it be best to take screenshots and then maybe start a folder, keeping tabs on that exploration? What do you think is the best way to, um, I guess, go a little bit back and forth between the petal explorations?
Um, yeah, well, for sure you'll have your worksheets, and I think you're seeing it's pretty quick to go from worksheet to flower. So
Mm.
we've got you there. Um, Kelsey, do you want to share your screen one more time?
Yep.
Um, so we didn't show you these little buttons, but if you click on, I forget which one it is now, Kelsey, you're just going to have to try it. It's so funny to not. There, save current parameters, the one with the little plus sign on it. Um, that's going to save to your hard drive a file that then you can reopen with that other button that says something like load saved parameters. So you can just give it a name, my beautiful flower, and you'll be able to open it later or email it to someone else and they can open it in their version of flower.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes. Is there a way to download the guide? Um, yeah, I think from our website, it's just a PDF that you can download.
So if you go to View User Guide and then
I just found
to the
it.
right,
Yeah.
yep, there you go. It looks like we have a question from JD as well.
Hi, thank you. Not a question, but a comment. Dr. Swain, I've been using the flower since it was 2 dimensions and static on paper, and it's just lovely to see that it's becoming more dynamic so that it can actually replicate the kind of system ripples that we often miss when working in. I work with school groups and teachers on climate action, and being able to see that, being able to visualize that part that's so important. Because my flowers, there were some flower stems that were really tiny, but tiny still progress. And so what it does is show that that every action matters, because sometimes we can't see the progress because it's either not in our sphere or it's happening somewhere else. But I just thought it was a wonderful evolution. So thank you for walking us through so skillfully, Kelsey, because it is tricky to manage the pieces. Because at one point I'm flipping through screens, but I just took a breath and I'm like, just you can find it, just get it done. But it was a lovely experience. Thank you so much. It's just with gratitude I wanted to express that.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, JD. And I love picturing you with teachers and students. And check out our website while you're there if you're curious about this paper version, which sometimes is more inviting than the app. And that's there for you to experiment with as well. Okay. Well, we try to start on time and end on time, so we're gonna just thank you all. You know where to find us. Be in touch and share your innovations because there's more ways to use flour than we even know, I think. Okay, be well, everybody.
Thank you.